Hey, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of the Intentional Life Podcast. I'm AJ Selby, and this is my wife,
Amy Selby. Jumping the gun there a little bit, sorry.
That's okay. And this is where we talk about, we take questions from people, and then, maybe eventually we'll switch over to just talking other stuff. But as of right now, we take questions from people where we talk about life, relationships, purpose, calling, and about how shifting and adding just one additional layer of intentionality can shift everything for you. Well, hey, on this episode, we're actually going to pick back up from a previous conversation we were having that had to do with how you make big decisions together with your spouse. And we ran long on that episode, and there was a secondary question that kind of went with it that was from somebody else, but it matched up well with what we were talking about. And so, Amy, why don't you go ahead and read that question for us?
So this person says, I would love to hear your take on what it was like moving to a whole new city with basically just each other. I know you've both done that a lot, but for somebody who's never left their hometown, it kind of blows my mind.
That story alone in and of itself is kind of crazy, but I guess we'll back up a little bit in that I always moved around growing up.
Yeah, from the time you were little.
Yeah.
Like toddler age, baby age.
Let me see if I can remember. I was born in Chicago, lived in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, then went to Bend, Oregon, Sisters, Oregon, Colorado Springs, Nashville, then the Charlotte area. I say Charlotte area because we lived all around Charlotte. Then Franklin, North Carolina. I graduated high school in Franklin. And then I moved to Asheville, North Carolina for college. Then I went back to Charlotte, North Carolina.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm at 10 moves so far by the time I hit 19.
Mm-hmm.
Gosh. So I went back to Charlotte, was doing more college there and working. And then I joined the Air Force and I moved to San Antonio. I lived in and around San Antonio for 6.5 years, and I lived.
So you had a couple different moves within
San Antonio.
Yeah.
And then from San Antonio, I went back to Franklin, North Carolina, which is where we met.
Mm-hmm.
And then we moved from Franklin here to Nashville. And so I'm at.
And we've moved once within Nashville. So I'm at 13 cities and 34 years of life. That sounds exhausting.
Yeah, we just moved around from
like
my
your parents' jobs and stuff,
Yeah, my
right?
dad's jobs mostly. He wasn't military, but we moved for jobs, and then we moved. There were times that they moved to decide to be closer to family and things like that. And then, I was moving for college and work and where I felt God was calling us to. And so, yeah, me moving is actually like pretty normal.
I feel like you kind of get a little antsy if you're in the same place too long.
Maybe.
Like, not like crazy antsy, but I feel like you start to get the itch. Like, your hobby is looking at Zillow. Like, if
guilty as charged.
If part of his way of like calming down at the end of the day, I feel like at least a few days out of the week, we'll watch a show and you're on Zillow just browsing different cities, the city we're currently in, like just for fun, just to see what's there, what the options are. And sometimes you're like, what if we did this? And I'm like, no, I don't think so.
And I think, I don't know, that might change a little bit whenever we finally end up building and have our own home. And then I'll just be occupied with my own home projects.
Right. Then you can just get antsy there and build stuff here and build something over here. And
I think once I have a garage and some kind of shop space and then where I can piddle and do whatever, I think, I think that'll change. I will probably still continue to look at Zillow all the time.
It is kind of fun, but
I think
it's just funny.
I think that's kind of, it's just kind of ingrained in me, I guess, a little bit. But,
yeah.
And then, so in 34 years of life, I've moved and lived in 13 cities. Mm-hmm. And Amy, how many cities have you lived in your whole life?
So I'm 30 years old, and I have lived in 3 cities in my whole life. From the time I was born to 19, I lived in the same house. So already my growing up years were vastly different than yours in that regard.
Yeah.
I was like, grew up in the same house, went to the same school and church for the majority of that time. So like everything in my life was planted in the same places, pretty much, for the majority of those 19 years. And so there wasn't a whole lot of uprooting and changing and moving and having to figure things out like that for me. So then when I was 19, I left home, and that was Charlotte, North Carolina is where I grew up. And then left home, went to Franklin, North Carolina to go do an internship at the ministry, where we ended up meeting 7 years later, 7.5 years later, where I eventually joined staff. And then after we got married, we were still on staff at that ministry. And then was it like 9 months later, we up and moved to Nashville.
Yeah, September of 2019 is when we moved here to Nashville.
So that's, the extent of my moving.
Yeah, which I guess kind of really brings us to the primary question. And I think, I mean, obviously my 13 cities, Amy's 3, I think we're going to have very different perspectives on it, because for me, it's almost normal. I've moved completely to a city with knowing maybe one person or nobody. Like when I joined the military, I ended up in San Antonio. I knew 0 people.
Right.
And so that was a big thing in and of itself. But then, like when I went to college, I only knew one other person in Asheville. You know, I've had other people in other cities where I've moved to. And even moving back up to Franklin, I really only knew like 4 people maybe.
Well, because, so many people from like staff and everything had changed, and you weren't in high
so,
school anymore. And
So, I mean, when it comes to like having friends and people, like I've always been able to go and find more people, because like I know the things that I enjoy and the things that I like, and I just go find where that stuff is happening, and then I find people that are interested in that and make friends with them and hang out.
I'm not like that at all.
And then,
I'm the opposite.
Like here in Nashville, like, you know, there's a buddy that I have that all he and I do, we've hung out and got dinner one time. Outside of that, every other time we hang out, we're either at the archery range, which is where we met, or we're hunting. And we talk like frequently, but that's where we met, and that's our common ground. And like we have a lot more in common now as we've like talked and hung out and learned more. We've known each other about a year now. But I mean, that was just how we met. And so when it comes to moving, there are the inconveniences of like, okay, where am I going to live? Where's the nearest grocery store? Who provides my internet? You know, how am I getting around the city? What else is there to eat? And, you know, what is there to do? But I always like exploring. Like I always have fun doing that. Like I like exploring. I like finding those things. I like figuring things out, which I feel is probably more of an inconvenience for you.
A little bit. I've gotten a little more used to it living with you, but being married to you, because you are very adventurous.
Sorry, not sorry.
You don't need to be sorry for it. Yeah, but also like you talking about when you're moving, and then you have all the logistical things of like internet and getting your address changed to these different places, and like changing, literally everything has to change. Got to get your new driver's license, all this stuff. Well, I realized like when the first time I moved, which was from Charlotte to Franklin, I was moving to a ministry to live on property at that ministry for a purpose of the job I was going to be doing there. So I didn't have to look for a job. I didn't have to look for a place to live. I didn't have to, like, there were so many things I did not have to figure out that you would with a normal move. So it was like when we did move to Nashville, I was like, oh,
Kind of freaked you out a
what
little
do we
bit.
do? Like, I don't know what any of the steps are. I don't know. Like, I really didn't. Because I went from living in my parents' house to living at a ministry. And, like, I paid my own bills and stuff when I lived on my, like, I even paid my car insurance when I was in my parents' house. Like, I paid bills and stuff, but I didn't know what it took to set up a house, to set up a home. Like, what does it take to move to
Yeah.
a new state? I don't know. I've never done that before. So that was really interesting for me. And I was really thankful that I had you to help me with that. I mean, I would have figured it out if it was just me, but it was like, this is all new territory. I literally have no idea what I'm doing. It kind of felt like I was back at 19, moving for the first time. Like, that's what it felt like. But instead, I was 26, moving to Nashville. Yeah, that was wild. And you had done it like a million times. So you were like, oh, yeah, you just do this and you do this and you do this. And I'm like looking up Pinterest, like, what do you do when you move? Like, how do you, what is it? I need a Pinterest list of like things to check off, which was actually very helpful. I
Shout
think
out
I
to
did find
Pinterest
one.
checklists.
Hey.
If you want to sponsor the show,
Oh my goodness. Anyway, so it was, yeah, we came from very different experience, like backgrounds and experiences with moving, and had to figure out moving to Nashville together.
some of that question where it ties into the previous conversation we were having about big decisions was, I think some of what this person might be asking is like, how did you end up deciding to do that?
I don't know. They just asked, what was that like for you?
Yeah.
What was it in general? What was that like?
Yeah. I mean, moving from Franklin, I don't think, first off, we got married, and I think that we thought we would be at that ministry for a whole lot longer.
At least a couple more years.
Yeah.
That was our,
I think that was kind of like just what we assumed in our mind, because we were on the same page. We loved that ministry dearly. And, you know, we loved
Yeah.
serving the people that came there.
yeah, it wasn't like on our radar that like, we're going to get married and we're going to move. Like,
Yeah.
that was not the plan.
Just as it was as much of a surprise to us as it was to everybody else.
Yeah.
And so it really came from us, you know, just kind of getting a sense that there was a shift happening, and it's
Mhm.
just, you know, praying about it. And then just hearing really clearly from the Lord that Nashville was where we were supposed to go.
Yeah.
And I confirmed. I was like, Asheville? Because that
North
would
Carolina?
have made sense, because it would have been, you know, a couple hours closer to family, still in North Carolina, fun town, great food. I'd lived there before.
We knew
Kind-
people there.
It's a fun, creative space. It's kind of hippy dippy. There is some weird stuff there, but for the most part, like, it's a great community. It's a beautiful part of the country. If you ever get
Yeah.
a chance to go to Asheville, especially in the fall, go check it out. You can drive some of the Smoky Mountain Parkway. Or no, is it the Blue Ridge Parkway? Sorry. Blue Ridge Parkway. Smokies are not far from there. The Biltmore is gorgeous.
The Smokies are where we were in Franklin.
I know.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think. What's that other hotel?
The
Grove Park.
Grove Park. Yeah.
Grove Park Inn. Y'all, the
Oh, it's
Grove Park
gorgeous.
is gorgeous.
It's expansive to stay at, but it's
It-
gorgeous.
It's schmancy.
I mean, so is the Biltmore. But anyway.
Yes. But
But they have a lot of beautiful
yeah,
things.
there's a
Fun
lot of
things,
great
beautiful
stuff.
things.
But yeah, so it was like Asheville, like that made so much more sense in my mind.
Hmm.
And then just felt very clearly from the Lord, no, Nashville.
Hmm.
It was like, what in the world are we going to do in Nashville?
Yeah.
What the heck?
We don't really know anybody. You have a few extended family members
Yeah.
that I had never met before. Well, I met one of them at our wedding, but other than that, I didn't know any of them.
Mhm.
So I was really coming to a city that I literally knew nobody. And you were moving somewhere where pretty much you didn't know anybody. There were just a couple people on like the outskirts of town that
Yeah.
you're related to. But
There was one couple that we knew that,
oh, duh, hello.
Yeah.
How did I forget?
yeah, there was one couple. Shout out to Papa John and Mama Kate. We love you.
They're the best.
They're in South Africa now. We miss you. We love you. You're the best.
Yeah.
But yeah, there was one couple that we knew.
Which I didn't meet them until we moved here. Well, I had met John one time.
Correct.
But I didn't even know them until I got here.
Yeah.
So it was like,
And so,
wild.
but the way that went was that, we were both on the same page in knowing that, or in sensing that we were going to move, but we didn't know when and where.
Yeah.
And then I felt very strongly from the Lord that we were supposed to move to Nashville. So as we talked about in the conversation about making big decisions, I took that to Amy. I said, hey, this is what I am sensing. This is what I feel like the Lord is saying. And I know it's crazy. I need you to trust me on this, and let's just pray about it and let's talk. And what was your perspective on that?
Like when you brought it to me?
Yeah.
Well, I remember it was after church because you felt like you heard the Lord tell us to move to Nashville the night before.
Yeah.
And so you had to wait until after church the next day until we got home to sit down and talk to me about it. And you were like so nervous. I don't love change. It's not my favorite thing in the world. And especially someone who I had only moved one time and I was only a few hours away from home. And surrounded by people that were friends and like family to me. So it wasn't too hard to be where we were at the time. But other than that, not a change fan right here. And so I just remember you being really nervous. And you sat down on the couch with me and you were like, I really need to talk to you about something. And I'm not sure how you're going to take it. Can you just hear me out? And please don't freak out. And I was like, okay. Well, okay, sure. And so then you told me what had happened the night before and just your time with the Lord, and that you just really it was a very strong pull and feeling that we were supposed to go to Nashville. And when you told me that, all I felt was peace. And I was like, I just remember looking at you and being like, okay. And you were like, okay.
That's it?
That's it? That's your only reaction is okay? And I was like, well, yeah. And you're like, I was not sure exactly what to expect, but I was not expecting that. I was expecting you to be like, I need time to think about this. I don't know. You're asking me to leave all these people in this place. I was like, well, I don't know what all that's going to look like, but a few years earlier, and I had to explain this to you. I was like, a few years earlier, before I even met you, I remember feeling like I had already been, I loved the ministry I was at. I loved where I was, but I did not plan on being there as long as I was there. I planned to be there for a summer internship, which then turned into what ended up being 7 years. So, 2 months turning into years and years and years. And every year I just made another year commitment because I just didn't feel like it was time for me to go. It wasn't time for me to go. And so a few years before this happened, I remember just being like, Lord, when do I get to go back home to my family? When, is it time for me to go yet? Can I start thinking about that? Can I start even approaching the topic in conversation with my leadership yet? Can I even talk about that with my family yet? Is that a possibility for me right now? Because I wasn't planning to be here for 4 years. And which at the time felt like forever. And looking back, it's 4 years is nothing. And I remember the Lord told me several different times in several different ways. And one was through a guest speaker that we had at a conference who looked directly at me. He was like, I just really feel like the Lord's saying, you can settle. When it's time for you to make the next move, You're going to know. You're not going to have to ask questions. You're going to feel peace, and you will know that you know that you know that that's the Lord telling you to make that next move. And I was like, okay. And he was like, I think the Lord's just asking you to just stop asking and just sit, be content until he tells you to move on. Yeah. So just feeling like, especially through what that guest speaker shared with me, but even just the confirmations of that through my time with the Lord and even through other people, I just had to go, okay, like I'm going to stop asking, like asking you, Lord, when I can go. And I just trust you that that's how it's going to be. Like, I'm just going to have peace. And I'm not going to be sitting there like wondering. And so fast forward a few years later to when we're sitting on the couch and you're telling me that the Lord told you we're supposed to move to Nashville, and just instantly I had peace. It was like this overwhelming, like I wasn't worried. I wasn't taken off guard. It was the weirdest, like best, but weirdest feeling.
Yeah.
Because my natural reaction to that would have been, you crazy person. You want me? I just got married to you. We thought we were going to be here longer. I need time to think about this. But that wasn't my response at all. So I knew it was the Lord immediately because it had nothing to do with how I would naturally respond. And immediately the Lord brought that word back to mind of like, remember, I told you you would have peace and you wouldn't even have to question if it was me or not when it was time for you to make the next step. And so I just shared that with you, and you were like, I think you were like, whoo, like, I don't think you did that physically, but I think inside you were like, okay, wow, that's amazing. I mean, that's just how that situation ended up playing out. Not every circumstance is going to be like that. Not every time we even move somewhere is going to be like that. But for whatever reason, that's just how it played out for that one. And, you know, that was, I think, in March of 2019, and we didn't move until September. So, like,
yeah,
you know, we had some time to, like, work stuff out and give a little more time to the ministry that we were with and, you know, finish out the busy season with them and all of that. So, thankfully, we did have time. But, yeah, there was a lot that went into... There's a lot that went into that, apart from that one conversation.
Yeah.
I mean, there were, obviously, we still had to have lots of conversations. We had to have conversations with, like, our boss, our leadership, talk through things with them, timelines.
Yeah. And
all the logistic things.
There's the logistical part, but I think that it can be important to touch on, too, that... It was like that season was a big exercise in obedience for us because there was nothing here in Nashville specifically for us to come and do right away. Where it was like we just had to say yes and begin moving in that direction. And then at that point was when different things started to kind of fall into place. Mm-hmm. Like we ended up, we came to Nashville for a trip to just pray and seek the Lord and get clarity on what the heck he was asking us to step into. And we came on a trip and, you know, we went on this long walk through the city. And it's funny, y'all, this is where communication comes in with your spouse because we didn't really talk a whole lot on the walk. We were just walking and praying and talking to the Lord and just thinking. And then we got back to the car and we sat in there, and both of us were actually kind of frustrated about because neither of us felt like we had any
kind of
clarity.
Frustrated. We were absolutely frustrated.
But yeah, we were trying to figure out, like, we didn't understand. And I mean, it can be such an exercise for us as Christians sometimes to be okay with not knowing.
Yeah.
And just trusting that he knows exactly what he's doing. But so that conversation went that we both got back to the car and we were sitting and then we're both frustrated. But then as we both started sharing little bits and pieces of what we were sensing from the Lord on our walk and talking about what we were thinking, that we got a bigger picture.
Yeah.
And we
And
gained peace. And we still didn't
Yeah.
have all the answers, but we did have clarity.
Well, I think we had enough that we already knew we were moving to Nashville no matter what. But I think the Lord just gave us enough to be like, there's going to be purpose here. And I think that was what we were struggling the most with, because we'd poured our lives into full-time ministry like daily. And it was like, we definitely have purpose where we were. And so to move somewhere and be like, do we even have purpose in Nashville? Like, what is the point? So I think the Lord gave us like little nuggets, like just little pieces. And even if it was like, okay, well, Nashville is going to be like a hidden place for you, like just to get your marriage started where you don't have all these other things. It's just you guys working it out together and figuring things out. And I feel like that's been like probably the biggest thing that has happened for us while being here, has just been growing in our marriage and really like building a foundation. But yeah, because then like 8 months after we moved here, COVID hit. So we had not very long until like, the world shut down and we're stuck in a city where we don't know very many people. And I mean, it doesn't matter if you know people or not, you're not really going to see anybody. And it was like, well, it's as good a time as any to work on building that foundation in your marriage.
Yeah.
But anyway.
Yeah, it was definitely just a time for us to grow in our relationship with the Lord, grow with each other. That really kind of covers like how we got to where we are. And not every move we ever have will be like that. Not every move will be being told it's time to go. Not every move we have will have those kind of specifics, but it's us being able to learn and grow and trust the Lord that, when our season's done, when do seasons change? And trusting, that he's leading us along the way. Not everything has to be a thus saith the Lord.
Yeah.
Off to Nashville you go. It's sometimes it's just life change.
Yeah.
And that's okay. There's another couple that we know that we've had conversations with that for them, they said, wow, that's kind of crazy. We've never had that kind of experience with the move like that before. We've always moved because of jobs, but we always made sure that regardless of the job, we followed the peace. And so so they would still seek the Lord in the location change because of a job. If there were a couple options on the table, they would follow the peace that the Lord was giving them. And I think that's really important.
And I love that input, because we've used the follow the peace input, not just in like physical moves, but in getting a job or any kind of so many different decisions and things. We're just really grateful for that input, because we've definitely used that. We're like, okay, Lord, we don't even have to have a clear picture, but where's your peace landing? Is it where we are, or is it somewhere else? That's so helpful.
Yeah.
And I think another important thing, I promise I'll keep it short. Going back to that previous conversation about making decisions as a married couple, we were newly married, not even a year. So we were definitely figuring out all the things that we talked about in that episode about making decisions together. We were figuring it out in the process of moving to Nashville. How do we need to communicate? How do we need to make these decisions? There were times that it was really easy for me to just be like, AJ, take the reins. You do it. You've done this a million times before. Just take over and I'll just follow. I'll just follow you. It'll be fine. But that wasn't what needed to happen, because there were things that I needed to engage in. There were conversations as well as like actual tasks, like practical things that needed to get done that I needed to engage in. But it was so much that it felt like a lot, especially with how much work we had going on at the time. There were times that I was so tempted to just be like, let him do it all. But that's not healthy either. So I had to figure out how to engage in that process with you other than just like, I'm along for the ride.
Yeah.
Once we got here, we had a lot of things to still figure out. What does the job situation look like? What does church look like? How do we make friends? Yeah, it was a really good season. Helped us build a lot of foundation in our marriage, work out a lot of those decision-making boundaries for us because we had to. And it was a stretching season, but it was also like it was fresh and new and exciting and terrifying all at the same time. Probably, again, going back to the beginning of our conversation, probably more for me than you because I'd pretty much never done it before. And you were like, just another day. Just another day being AJ.
Yeah. Well, I hope that answers the question. I think it's fun. It's kind of crazy, but that's kind of us. So,
yeah. And also, there's nothing wrong with being planted in the same place for like your entire life, which I don't think she was saying there was anything wrong with that. She was just fascinated by like, what's that process like? But for anybody who's listening who's like, well, I've never moved anywhere. Should I like, I honestly kind of wanted to be in the same city my whole life. I didn't really want to move anywhere, and the Lord took me and put me other places.
Yeah.
But both are beautiful. So I just want to point that out too.
Yeah.
That's all. I'm done.
Why don't you close it out with her question?
Okay. Okay. Let's see. This says...
Which deck is this from?
Oh, this is from the And card deck. If I lost my job, AJ, and decided to be a stay-at-home parent, would that change me?
Is this asking me if it would change me?
Yes.
Like, I don't know how this is directed.
No. If I lost my job and decided to be a stay-at-home parent, would that change me? I think you're supposed to answer that about me. I guess I could technically answer it about you if you wanted, but...
I mean... maybe? I don't know. At this point, your job is working for me.
Which is from home.
Our media company.
Yeah.
So, if you lost that job, there's got to be something crazy that happened there. But no, I mean, it's your home. I mean, that's one of our desires is for you to be a stay-at-home parent, which is part of why we're building this company so that you can do that.
Yeah.
And so, no, I mean, once we have kids and you are a stay-at-home mom, I think there will be plenty about just the parenting stuff that will change you.
Yeah. I mean, I was literally thinking the same thing. Like, I think becoming a parent will change anybody, regardless of if you're keeping your job or not. But
which I can't wait to do that. Can't wait to be parents. It's going to be fun.
Yeah.
So.
Definitely something we look forward to.
What about me? Would that change me?
I don't know. I mean, I see you staying very much you. Like, again, we literally just said, pretty sure becoming a parent, there's definitely going to be things that are going to change and stretch and whatever. But I don't know. I mean, there's really no way to know, but I don't really see you changing a whole lot in terms of like not having a job. It'd be weird to not see you in a job because you love having something to like do.
Right, but
you would find plenty to do.
Yeah.
If you were a stay-at-home parent.
Look, I'm totally fine with making a switcherooski if you want to be my sugar mama and I'll be a stay-at-home dad.
No.
Yo, let's go. Taking the kids fishing and hunting and teaching them about the woods and building stuff.
Well, that's why we build this company and create the schedule that works for our family. That's the dream, the goal. Might take a while, but that's the dream.
You're not wrong.
So it's like we could both kind of have a little bit of stay-at-home-ishness.
Stay-at-home-ishness.
Yeah.
That's a thing.
Coin that one.
So, well, right on. You got anything else to add, baby?
Nope.
All right. Well, hey, everyone. Thank you so much for listening to this week's episode of the Intentional Life Podcast. Be sure to go and follow us on social media, Instagram, all the things. Click like, subscribe, comment, give us a review, and send in your questions to Google Form. I'm AJ Selby.
I'm Amy Selby.
And this is the Intentional Life Podcast.